Thank you, Mr. President. Just some quick numbers. I tabulated that $800 a home or a household for 1,800 people comes out to about $1.4 million. And I guess what we're looking at is what are we going to do next year? We had to raise the tax this year 30 cents higher than what we thought it was needed to be in order to offset some of these costs, so it wasn't going to be a great impact throughout the town. So now basically you've got the residential exemption. Nothing's going to change for this year. What are we looking at for next year? Are we just going to are we going to need 1.4 million set aside?
I'll let Mark answer that, but let me clarify on, it was 31 cents when we thought none of them qualified and we're supporting them. It's 12 cents with the people that remain is what it ended up being, about $37 on a medium valued house. Now, I'm sure nobody likes that, but it's been going on for 5 years. So we've got to clean it up at some point so it doesn't continue to happen. And we're trying to make sure the taxpayers of this town don't continue to pay for people who shouldn't be getting this exemption. And that was the whole point of doing this, not just compliance with state law, but fairness to the interest of the taxpayers. And it's one of those bite the bullet one-time situations. This is the only way to clean this thing up, and we've done it with the least fiscal impact that we can work on. And I think Mark can address next year's issues.
Yes, through you, Mr. President, what we did this year is for 2011 we increased the amount that we're setting aside for overlays and exemptions by up to $1.7 million for next year's budget to protect us against the potential that once this residential exemption is removed from these remaining properties, that as Mr. Rudziak was saying, is probably going to entice some people to finally respond. And when they do, we'll have to give them a refund next year. So we increased our overlay account to cover us for that.
And through you, Mr. President, continuation, where is the money coming from for the 1.7? Are we going to have an increased tax levy in order to be able to fill up that 1.7?
The tax levy for next year is projected to go up by the 2.5% allowed by Prop 2.5, and that's it. So we're going to use some of that growth and then put it into the overlay account, which means there's less available for operations.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Rugo.
So to do those maybe 600 or 400
we only did postcards once, and we did the postcards to every single residential house.
No, I'm just talking about the 1,800 on your list.
Understood. And we'd be just as happy to send them another actual letter and envelope.
Frankly, I got
easier.
On third time was a charm. I came in after your letter. I had the May 3rd date. Right? But I've been on this issue since last year with you guys. Because I knew that there'd be this problem, that everybody wouldn't react because people's lives are busy, and now you've had seniors who were confused. And I read your letters, I read each one of them, and it wasn't easy to understand the whole thing and what to do in the process. But I'd just suggest perhaps one final postcard. It's a small mailing, maybe clarify the situation, might help on the other end.
We were anticipating something like that perhaps when we get around to September or something closer to the bill.
I don't mean to...
No, not at all. I think it's a valuable suggestion.
Councilor Milne.
Yes, thank you. There's a reason why that 31 cent got attached to the tax rate. And so now going forward, because you did answer Councilor Manafo's question, and I appreciate that, but just for the benefit of the public and just to put my hands totally around this, you're now visualizing going forward that money simply is just going to give us an increased amount in the overlay savings account, anticipating possible abatements. That's what I thought I heard you say, that essentially that additional tax money is going to get set aside for next year to protect us if more of these folks come back, even though they went through these various deadlines, that they say that they deserve the exemption. Am I understanding that correctly? Or maybe I'm not spelling it out very well, but essentially, is that where that 31 cents is going, or are we going to see? Because at one point, I remember when we talked about this previously, there was some talk that there would be a softener effect on next year's tax rate because of this one-time blip this year. so that the tax rate might be a bit lower because it was inflated a bit this time.
We need to clarify that the overlay is an all-purpose buffer that has been funded essentially for two purposes: to fulfill exemption requirements such as 41C, the elderly, and the veterans, and those type of exemptions. We never know exactly how many we're going to get, but we do know roughly how many we're going to get every year. So we have to have extra in for that. It is also a buffer for abatements, and we do know that just like when we went through this current year with a recertification year, people come out of the woodwork after that happens, and we put out more money than we normally do. As recently as 2004, the overlay was funded to the tune of $2.1 million, which had nothing to do with an issue like this. So funding the overlay has typically been a requirement that has had to be a guess and should be a generous guess so that we don't run into overlay. Mm-hmm. So the 31 cents is not really a one-to-one relationship, and as I mentioned, it's actually only 12 cents because 19 of those cents were justified.
Okay.
The people actually deserved it.
Yeah.
And I'd like to emphasize, out of the 1,800 that those 12 cents represent, we don't know how many don't deserve it. It may be all of them, but we can't tell until we make them show up and give us some type of answer. And that's where we are in the process right now.
Okay, thank you. The only other follow-up, if I could, Councilor Kennedy asked about getting these lists. I think